A hush fell over the crowded courtroom the moment Samantha's knees buckled. All eyes swung to the young wife, her hands trembling as they clutched her pregnant belly. Tension hung thick in the air 20 minutes earlier. Everyone had been engrossed in a heated legal battle, with accusations flying between wealthy real estate mogul Christopher Delgado and his estranged former business partner. But when Samantha passed out, everything changed. The millionaire rose from his seat, approached the bench, and whispered a single sentence to the judge. In an instant, the entire room was stunned into silence. What could he possibly have said? The city of Los Angeles had seen its fair share of high-profile trials, but there was an electric sense in the air that morning when Christopher Delgado's black Rolls-Royce pulled up outside the Stanley Mosk Courthouse. Paparazzi and reporters lined the steps, jostling with spectators, hoping to catch a glimpse of Delgado's arrival. Rumor had it that his secretive empire, Delgado Enterprises, was under fire from an ex-partner claiming breach of contract and fraud. But swirling beneath the main lawsuit was a swirling undercurrent of scandal. Delgado's wife, Samantha Delgado, was 8 months pregnant, and rumors of a complicated, possibly illicit business affair overshadowed the pregnancy. Samantha had been a teacher before she met Christopher. They'd been introduced at a gala fundraiser for the LA Unified School District. Samantha was there to advocate for her special needs classroom, while Christopher had shown up to make a large donation. Their chance conversation had sparked immediate mutual intrigue. Where everyone else saw Christopher as a man of unstoppable ambition and wealth, Samantha observed in him a longing for simpler times, for a life that had meaning beyond the zeros in his bank account. Even though she was hesitant, having heard rumors of Christopher's fearsome reputation, she'd let her guard down enough to exchange phone numbers. 6 months later, they were married. The tabloids reported everything from a whirlwind romance to a calculated marriage for money. Samantha did her best to ignore the noise. She saw Christopher not as a ruthless tycoon, but as a man who'd grown up with nothing and fought for every last dollar in his fortune. He carried scars from his past, especially from an unscrupulous father who had vanished when Christopher was only 8 years old. Samantha loved him for his complexity, his protective nature, and the depth of his devotion traits that media headlines rarely showed. As for the lawsuit, few people outside a small circle of associates truly understood the extent of what was at stake. The plaintiff, a disgruntled former partner named Marco Avelar, had once been a close confidant of Christopher's. They'd shared in the success of Delgado Enterprises' expansions into real estate developments across California. But things turned sour after an ambitious commercial property deal in downtown Los Angeles. Marco alleged that Christopher had cut him out of the profits, unfairly forging documents and colluding with officials to mask a huge payout. Christopher, on the other hand, insisted that Marco had disappeared from the project weeks before its completion, failing to uphold his end of the bargain. Emotions ran high. Samantha, who'd grown close to Marco's wife Giuliana during countless corporate dinners, was torn. On one hand, she trusted Christopher and believed he would never stoop to fraud. But on the other, Marco had once been a steadfast presence in their circle, someone she'd danced with at her wedding, someone who had toasted to her future with Christopher. That he would accuse Christopher of such wrongdoing made little sense to her. Yet the tension in the Delgado household was undeniable. Christopher had always been protective, but lately he'd gone from caretaker to watchdog. He insisted that Samantha not drive herself anywhere, that she have a bodyguard, that she skip any public events. She chalked it up to the heightened media scrutiny around the lawsuit, but it felt like something more, something he wasn't telling her. The morning of the hearing, Samantha could barely sleep. She woke before sunrise, her heart fluttering with anxiety and the baby kicking restlessly in her belly. Christopher had tried to dissuade her from attending the proceedings. The stress was too great. The baby was due in just a few weeks, and he feared for her health. Yet Samantha insisted. She was determined to support him publicly, to show the world that she stood by her husband's side. Arriving at the courthouse, Samantha clung to Christopher's arm as paparazzi hollered questions. "Mr. Delgado, is it true you falsified contracts, Samantha? Do you believe your husband is innocent? When is the baby due?" Christopher's stern expression never wavered as he guided Samantha through the throng. Only once they were inside did he exhale, giving her a tender look that conveyed both gratitude and concern. He murmured, "You okay?" Samantha nodded, but an ominous feeling settled in the pit of her stomach. She told herself it was just nerves. After all, she was about to witness her husband in the fight of his life. His reputation, his fortune, and possibly even his freedom hung in the balance. Still, she could never have anticipated the chain of events that would unfold in that courtroom: her own physical collapse, Christopher's desperate whisper, and the secrets it would unravel. Little did she know, everyone's world was about to change. The courtroom was one of those austere, high-ceilinged chambers where every movement seemed amplified. Intricate columns flanked the judge's bench, and a towering American flag stood to one side, its presence both majestic and imposing. Rows of wooden benches filled quickly with press-curious onlookers and a few supporters from both Christopher's and Marco's circles. Samantha settled into her seat, eyes roaming the crowd. She spotted Giuliana Avelar near the front, her posture stiff, her expression grim. The two women locked eyes briefly, exchanging hesitant, sad smiles. They hadn't spoken in weeks. Samantha felt a pang in her chest, recalling the late-night phone calls, the lunches spent giggling at, inside jokes now severed by the legal battle between their husbands. Marco himself was seated at a long table across from Christopher's legal team. He was a slender man with graying hair and a meticulous suit that looked almost too big for his slight frame. But his eyes were sharp, a trait that had once served him well in business negotiations. He glanced at Christopher with a gaze that mingled hurt anger and something else, maybe regret. Christopher exuded confidence, clad in a tailored navy suit, posture impeccable. At his side, leading the defense, was the renowned attorney Daniel Whitmore. Daniel specialized in high-stakes corporate litigation, known for his unrelenting cross-examinations and his ability to turn the tide in seemingly impossible cases. Samantha had shaken his hand only once. His eyes had been piercing, his manner concise, giving her the feeling he was already analyzing her every expression. There was also a presence in the courtroom. Samantha hadn't expected Dr. Olivia Dawson, a private counselor, who had once mediated disputes within Delgado Enterprises. Samantha recognized her from a corporate gala 2 years back. Rumor had it she was privy to the deepest secrets of powerful men, always the calm voice behind closed doors, coaxing them toward resolution. Why she was here today, Samantha could only guess. "Court is now in session," the bailiff announced, and Judge Robert Hamilton took his seat. He was a man in his mid-50s, face unreadable beneath thick, dark eyebrows. He'd presided over multiple landmark corporate cases in LA, building a reputation for impartiality and stern discipline. The weight of his gaze made Samantha's pulse quicken. Marco's attorney, Madeline began with an opening statement outlining the allegations Christopher had orchestrated a sham arrangement to push Marco out of the real estate deal at the last minute, thereby claiming the project's entire profit margin. She presented financial ledgers, copies of emails, and transcripts of phone calls. Madeline's tone was calm and calculated, but the content was incendiary, implying that Christopher not only lied, but used intimidation and bribery to ensure cooperation from city planners and potential witnesses. Samantha tensed as Madeline spoke. She'd never known Christopher to be unscrupulous. Yes, he was relentless in business, but bribery threatening city officials. It sounded like a sensational storyline, ripped from a TV drama. She glanced at Christopher, searching for a reaction, but his face was a mask of composure. Next, Daniel Whitmore offered the defense's perspective. He explained that Marco was the one who had abandoned the development before it secured vital permits. Marco had withdrawn his initial investment at a critical juncture, forcing Christopher to infuse his own capital to keep the project afloat. Consequently, the profits were his alone to claim. Daniel dismissed the allegations of bribery and fraud as baseless accusations from a man who lost out on a gamble and now wants a second bite at the apple. At one point, Daniel produced an affidavit from a city official named Leonard Michaels, affirming that no bribes had been offered or accepted. Samantha noticed tension ripple through Marco's team at the mention of Michaels. Perhaps they expected Daniel to omit him altogether. The first seeds of confusion took root in Samantha's mind. Could it be that Marco, once a dear friend, was fabricating this entire scenario? Midway through the proceedings, the judge called for a brief recess. Samantha used the opportunity to step outside for a breath of fresh air. Standing beneath the courthouse arches, she closed her eyes and felt the morning sun warm her skin. Her unborn baby shifted, sending a ripple across her abdomen. She whispered gently, "Almost there, sweet one. We'll get through this." Mrs. Delgado, a soft voice, interrupted her reverie. Samantha turned to see Giuliana Avelar, approaching, hesitation evident in her posture. I wanted to ask if you're all right. You look pale." Her words caught Samantha off guard. So much distance had formed between them, yet here Giuliana was offering concern. Samantha forced a small smile. "Just tired and worried." Giuliana nodded, eyes downcast. "I miss our talks. I miss the times before all this madness. If only it didn't come to this lawsuit. Marco, I don't know what's gotten into him, but he's convinced Christopher cheated him." Samantha held Giuliana's gaze, wanting to ask 1,000 questions. But the bailiff's voice rang out, calling everyone back inside. With an apologetic shrug, Samantha turned to head back into the courtroom. Before she left, Giuliana placed a gentle hand on Samantha's shoulder. "Take care of yourself. The baby needs you." Samantha re-entered the courtroom in a swirl of conflicting emotions. If Giuliana was uncertain about her own husband's motives, what did that say about the case? Yet Samantha couldn't shake the feeling that the real truth was tangled in some deeper undercurrent neither she nor Giuliana fully understood. Back in session, witness after witness took the stand. Some spoke in favor of Marco's narrative, claiming to have overheard suspicious phone calls or seen unusual money transfers. Others confirmed Christopher's version, insisting Marco had walked away voluntarily. Tensions in the gallery escalated as each piece of testimony contradicted the last. At times, the judge had to bang his gavel to restore order. The press scribbled notes furiously, cameras flashed, and Samantha's heart pounded with each new revelation. Then came a pivotal moment, the introduction of a covertly recorded conversation between Christopher and an unknown individual. Madeline James played an audio clip where Christopher's voice was heard referencing a payout and the need to keep someone silent. Samantha felt her blood run cold. Christopher's expression darkened, and Daniel immediately objected, questioning the tape's authenticity. The judge allowed the tape to stand provisionally, pending verification. Samantha's mind reeled. The phrases on the recording were ambiguous, but they certainly hinted at wrongdoing. She tried to remind herself that anyone could splice audio, but the ominous cloud of possibility weighed heavily on her chest. And there, in the midst of this swirling chaos, Samantha felt a sudden wave of dizziness. She placed a hand on her abdomen. The baby kicked back, a frantic flutter that mirrored her own unease. Something about that tape, the recess conversation with Giuliana and the presence of Dr. Olivia Dawson, stirred a sense of mounting dread inside Samantha. She could never have guessed that within minutes, her very body would betray her, seizing the entire courtroom's attention and triggering a moment so startling that it would bring everything to a standstill. As the morning wore on, the tension in the room intensified. Samantha felt every nerve firing beneath her skin. She tried to steady her breathing, telling herself again and again that Christopher would never betray her trust or resort to illegal tactics. She reminded herself of the nights she had seen him pacing the living room, reviewing documents, pushing his legal team to be thorough and honest. Still, she couldn't deny the anxiety swirling like a storm in her gut. The bailiff called the court back to order. Judge Hamilton signaled for Marco's attorney to continue. "Ms. James," he said, "please proceed with your next piece of evidence." Madeline James nodded, stepping forward with a document clutched between her manicured fingers. "Your Honor, we have here a ledger that shows a series of payments, unusually large sums, funneled through one of Delgado Enterprises' offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The receiving account belongs to a city planning official who oversaw the real estate development in question. We believe these payments constitute a bribe." A murmur spread through the courtroom. Samantha's throat constricted. Offshore accounts. She remembered Christopher mentioning something about reorganizing funds overseas, but he had justified it as a common practice for major corporations looking to optimize their tax strategy. Could these documents be real, or were they fabricated? Daniel Whitmore immediately objected. "Your Honor, we question the validity of these documents. They have not been properly authenticated. This is more slanderous speculation from the plaintiff's side." The judge glanced over the papers. "Let's mark these for identification. I will allow preliminary discussion, but counsel must provide verification before we admit them into evidence." Samantha watched Daniel return to his seat, exchanging a whispered conversation with Christopher. Although Daniel seemed calm, Christopher's jaw was clenched, the lines on his forehead etched deep. A flicker of desperation passed across his eyes. Samantha had rarely seen him so unsettled. Her heart ached to comfort him, but she felt rooted to her seat, powerless in this legal arena. One after another, witnesses were called. An accountant from Delgado Enterprises testified that the payments were part of a legitimate contractual agreement with a consultant for market research. The prosecuting side, however, tried to poke holes in every explanation, insinuating that consultant fees was just a euphemism for bribes. Throughout all of this, Samantha felt her body temperature rising. The baby's movements grew restless. She fanned herself with a folded piece of paper, trying to stave off the dizziness creeping up her spine. She glanced at Giuliana again. The other woman's face was etched with worry, but Samantha couldn't discern whether she was worried for Marco, for Samantha's baby, or for the entire fiasco swirling around them. Then, in a decisive twist, Madeline James called a surprise witness, a private investigator named James Forrester. Samantha blinked in surprise. She'd heard the name before. Forrester was a discreet figure, known to operate in wealthy circles, unearthing secrets that powerful men preferred to keep hidden. She had no idea he was connected to Marco or this case. Forrester took the stand, looking impeccably groomed with silver hair neatly parted and eyes that seemed to take in every detail. Madeline asked him to state his credentials and involvement in the case. Forrester explained that Marco had hired him 6 months prior to follow leads, gather financial data, and interview individuals who might shed light on Delgado Enterprises' practices. He leaned toward the microphone, voice calm. I uncovered evidence of questionable wire transfers, unreported assets, and communications suggestive of collusion with city officials. He glanced at Christopher. In particular, I found an email chain that details the arrangement for a special fee to expedite zoning approvals. The name on the receiving end is none other than Leonard Michaels. Samantha's head reeled. Leonard Michaels, again. The same official Daniel Whitmore claimed had sworn there was no wrongdoing. If Forrester's evidence held water, it would look terribly incriminating for Christopher. She sought her husband's gaze, but his eyes were fixed on the witness stand, face drawn tight. He looked like a cornered animal ready to strike or flee. Daniel objected fiercely to Forrester's testimony, calling it hearsay and unsubstantiated. The judge decided to schedule a separate hearing later in the week to delve deeper into these documents. For the moment, they would move forward, but the possibility of additional charges loomed like a thundercloud. As the noon hour approached, Samantha's headache worsened. She pressed a hand to her temples, feeling beads of sweat form along her hairline. She inhaled deeply, trying to ignore the swirl of fear building inside her. Perhaps it was just the heat in the courtroom, or the emotional roller coaster, or the pregnancy amplifying everything tenfold. Yet a small instinctive alarm rang in the back of her mind. Something was not right with her body. Finally, Judge Hamilton called for a lunch recess. Everyone began filing out, and Samantha stood on shaky legs. Her vision blurred, momentarily black spots dancing in front of her eyes. She felt Christopher's hand on her elbow, steadying her. "You need to sit," he murmured. "Let's get you somewhere quiet." She nodded, trying to speak, but her mouth felt too dry. They made it into the hallway, thronged with reporters and curious onlookers. Flashes erupted as cameras clicked, voices shouting, "Mrs. Delgado, are you feeling all right, Mr. Delgado? How do you respond to the bribery claims?" Christopher's grip tightened around Samantha's arm. She felt her heartbeat thudding in her ears. The baby kicked wildly as though sensing her distress. She opened her mouth to ask for water, but the hallway spun. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Samantha Christopher's voice sounded distant. She tried to steady herself, but her legs gave out. A gasp rippled through the crowd, and she felt strong arms catch her just before she hit the polished tiles. The last thing she remembered was the chorus of voices around her, rising in pitch, someone yelling to call an ambulance, Christopher shouting her name again, and then blackness. Unbeknownst to Samantha, in that very moment, Christopher's entire facade cracked. The immovable, unshakable billionaire dropped to his knees on the courthouse floor. Panic and raw terror etched into every line of his face. While the cameras flashed, capturing the chaos, no one guessed that the real drama was just beginning, and that Christopher's next actions would challenge every assumption they'd ever had about him. When Samantha came to, she was lying on a hospital gurney in a side room just off the main corridor of the courthouse. The fluorescent lights above flickered like tired eyes. Her breath came in ragged pulls as she tried to sit up. Immediately, she felt a gentle yet firm hand guide her back down. "Take it slow," said a soothing voice. A paramedic in a crisp uniform name tag, reading Hernandez, offered her water. "You fainted. Your blood pressure was low." Samantha sipped gratefully, wincing at the dryness in her throat. Her eyes roamed the cramped room. Christopher hovered nearby, his usually composed features marred by raw concern. His jacket was off-tie, loosened. He looked less like a courtroom powerhouse and more like a terrified husband. "Are you all right?" he asked, voice trembling slightly. She nodded. "I think so. The baby—" The paramedic nodded. "Baby's heartbeat is strong, but you should see your OB/GYN as soon as possible, just to be safe." Relief spread through Samantha, though the tension in her body remained. She wanted nothing more than to go home to rest in a quiet place, far away from the prying eyes of the media. But she also knew the gravity of Christopher's court case. She feared that her fainting spell would only add more drama, giving tabloids more fodder. "I'll handle everything," Christopher insisted, as though reading her thoughts. "We'll get you to the hospital if needed. I don't care about the hearing right now." "Chris, please," she murmured. "You can't just walk away from the trial. It's important." Before he could reply, a stern voice spoke from the doorway. Judge Hamilton stood there, black robes rustling around him. "Mr. Delgado, Mrs. Delgado, how are we feeling?" Samantha tried to straighten, grateful for Christopher's supporting hand behind her back. "I'm better, Your Honor," she managed. The judge nodded relief, evident in his expression. Then he fixed Christopher with a measured stare. "Mr. Delgado, your wife's health is paramount, of course. We can consider a brief continuance if necessary. However, I must remind you that this case is nearing its critical stages. We have mounting evidence that needs thorough examination." Christopher's eyes hardened briefly, as though locking away his vulnerability behind a veil of determination. "I understand, Your Honor. I just need a moment with my wife." The judge inclined his head. "Take the necessary time, but do keep in mind the court will resume shortly. If you need a postponement, file the request properly." With that, Judge Hamilton left the door clicking shut behind him. Samantha released a shaky breath. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to be the center of attention in there." Christopher brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead. "I'd tear down the entire courthouse if it meant keeping you safe. Don't apologize." The paramedic cleared his throat politely, folding his equipment bag. "She's stable. I'd advise a follow-up with her doctor. For now, if she feels up to it, she can rest somewhere quiet, maybe your car or a private area in the courthouse. But any more episodes like this, and we should head to the hospital right away." Samantha nodded, expressing her thanks. As Hernandez left, Christopher helped Samantha onto her feet. She felt wobbly, but managed to steady herself. Her mind spun with unanswered questions about the case, about the damning evidence, about what the future held. Suddenly, there was a soft knock. Olivia Dawson stepped in. She carried a calm, dignified air. "Samantha." "Christopher, I came to see if there's anything you need." Samantha blinked. She barely knew Dr. Dawson, yet her presence was oddly comforting. Christopher frowned as though uncertain why the counselor was in the private area at all. But Dr. Dawson remained composed, making it clear she was here to help, not pry. "I wanted to offer a quiet room on the second floor," Dr. Dawson explained. "It's often used for mediation sessions, and it's empty right now, far from the crowd." Samantha exhaled in relief. "That would be wonderful." Christopher took his wife's arm, gently. "Let's go," he said, still eyeing Dr. Dawson warily. The private mediation room was down a deserted hallway behind a set of frosted glass doors. Inside, the hum of overhead lighting was softer, the furniture plush. Samantha sank into a chair. Dr. Dawson set a bottle of water on the table. "I'll leave you two alone, but if you need anything, I'm just outside." With that, she departed, shutting the door quietly. Christopher knelt in front of Samantha, taking her hands in his. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. This is all my fault. You're under too much stress." Her heart clenched at the guilt in his eyes. She squeezed his hands back. "No, it's not your fault. I can't let you go through this alone. We're a team." His gaze flickered a storm of emotion behind them. Samantha sensed he was on the verge of some kind of confession, but then he glanced away, as though struggling to find the words. Finally, he took a deep breath. "Sam, there are things you don't know, things I can't discuss in open court. But I promise you, whatever's happening with these bribery allegations, I did not orchestrate them. If money changed hands, it was not by my choice." Her heart pounded. Then, he paused. "I suspect there's a mole in my company, someone who orchestrated side deals for personal gain. And they're pinning it on me, or at least they aren't correcting the record. I've been investigating quietly. That's why I've been so stressed, so protective. But it's complicated, Sam. It may involve powerful people who don't want this uncovered." Samantha's mouth went dry. "Why didn't you tell me?" He ran a hand through his hair. "I wanted to. I was afraid for your safety, the baby's safety. People who rig real estate deals for millions aren't known for their moral compasses." A wave of dizziness almost knocked her back again. So Christopher was tangled in a web beyond the lawsuit. What about Marco? Is he part of it? Christopher shrugged, frustration lacing his voice. Maybe unwittingly, or maybe he's in on it. I can't be sure. I do know he's convinced I betrayed him. The question is, who fed him that conviction? Samantha closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. So many puzzle pieces, yet none fit together neatly. If Christopher was innocent, then who was pulling the strings? A gentle knock broke the silence. Dr. Dawson peeked in. "I hate to interrupt, but the trial is resuming in 10 minutes. The judge asked me to check on your status." Christopher stood glancing at Samantha. Her eyes were still closed, and it tugged at his heart. "I'll handle the next part," he told her softly. "Stay here, rest." She opened her eyes, ready to argue, but relented upon seeing the concern etched in his face. "Please be careful," she whispered. With a grateful nod, Christopher left to return to the courtroom. Dr. Dawson offered Samantha a sympathetic smile. "I'll stay with you for a while, if you'd like." Samantha managed a grateful nod, and as the door closed again, she couldn't help but wonder if the real storm was only just beginning, especially given Christopher's cryptic mention of someone else orchestrating this entire scheme. Little did she know, the next few hours would bring revelations that would rattle everyone present. A single whisper uttered by Christopher to Judge Hamilton would pierce through the tension like a knife, dragging hidden truths into the light and leaving everyone from the bailiffs to the media utterly speechless. Christopher strode back into the courtroom as a collective whisper rippled through the onlookers. Journalists at the front craned their necks to see if Samantha was behind him. Marco shot Christopher a glance that mingled worry and bitterness. Even Judge Hamilton looked up, eyes narrowing, noting Samantha's absence. "Mr. Delgado," Judge Hamilton said, "is your wife all right to continue?" Christopher cleared his throat, gathering his composure. "She needs rest, Your Honor. The paramedics have cleared her, but she's quite weak. With your permission, she'll remain in a private room in the courthouse." Judge Hamilton nodded. "Very well. We'll proceed, but if you need to attend to your wife again, say the word." The entire exchange took only seconds, but it seemed to underscore the tension that had been building. Christopher resumed his seat beside Daniel Whitmore, who leaned in and whispered, "You sure you're up for this? We can request a continuance." Christopher's jaw set. "We press on. The sooner we end this, the better for all of us." The judge gavelled the court back into session. Madeline James rose, her stilettos clicking on the polished floor. "Your Honor, due to Mrs. Delgado's sudden collapse, we didn't fully address the financial ledgers from earlier. I'd like to present them now, along with supporting testimony from Mr. Avelar. Marco moved to the stand, his expression somber. Taking a seat, he spoke in a subdued voice. Yes, it's true. I discovered these offshore transactions after I asked for a routine audit. When I saw the transfers to Leonard Michaels, I confronted Christopher. He told me it was none of my concern. A slight tremor in Marco's voice hinted at genuine hurt. Christopher felt a pang of regret. He remembered how he'd grown distant from Marco around the time those suspicious anomalies surfaced, but only because he suspected someone else within the firm. He never told Marco why. Now Marco was brandishing that secrecy like a weapon. Daniel stood crossing the floor to begin his cross-examination. Mr. Avelar, can you prove that Mr. Delgado personally authorized these transfers, a signature, an email? Marco hesitated. No, but I was pushed out of the company before I could dig deeper, and Christopher refused to provide an explanation. The dryness in his voice resonated through the courtroom. People stirred, glancing between Christopher and Marco. The tension was palpable. Old friends turned bitter adversaries. Outside the main courtroom doors, Samantha was perched in the quiet mediation room, listening faintly through the thick walls. Dr. Dawson had stepped out to fetch her more water. Samantha felt a swirl of fear and frustration. She wanted to be at Christopher's side, to challenge the accusations, to demand the truth from both him and Marco. Yet her body begged for rest. She placed a hand over her belly, feeling the baby's gentle movement. "Shh," she murmured, as though comforting both her child and herself. Then a sudden wave of exhaustion overcame her. Her head drooped forward, eyes fluttering shut. She drifted in and out of a hazy dream state, the muffled sound of voices through the walls lulling her into uneasy rest. Back in the courtroom, the battle continued. Daniel attempted to discredit Marco's claims, pointing out discrepancies in dates and times. Still, Madeline James managed to paint a picture of mounting suspicion. By the time the afternoon shadows began to stretch across the wood-paneled room, it was clear that Christopher stood on precarious ground. Judge Hamilton signaled a recess, scheduling the next portion of testimony for later that afternoon. As soon as the gavel struck, Christopher bolted from his seat to check on Samantha. Reporters tried to shout questions, but bailiffs held them back. He slipped away, ignoring the flash of cameras. When he reached the mediation room, he found Samantha dozing lightly, her face pale. Dr. Dawson hovered, pressing a cool cloth to Samantha's forehead. Christopher's tension unraveled at the sight of her safe and resting. "How is she?" he asked quietly. Dr. Dawson smiled gently. "Just needs sleep. Her vitals seem stable." She stood, offering Christopher the chair beside Samantha. "I'll give you some privacy." Once alone, Christopher gently clasped Samantha's hand. She stirred, blinking up at him. "Chris is everything. All right?" He forced a reassuring smile. "We're managing. You focus on you and the baby." She squeezed his fingers, then her gaze grew serious. "Christopher, they're throwing everything at you in there. If there's a way to end this quickly..." His posture stiffened. For a heartbeat, he contemplated revealing everything, his suspicions about who in his company might be behind the shady deals. But there were too many unknowns, too much danger. If he named names without concrete proof, he could be held for libel or worse, tip off the real culprit that he was onto them. "I'll do what I must," he said softly, "to protect this family." Down the hall, the bailiff's voice echoed, calling everyone back to the courtroom. Christopher exhaled, pressing a gentle kiss to Samantha's forehead. "I have to go. I'll come right back as soon as I can." Samantha watched him leave, her heart twisting with equal parts love and fear. She felt closer to him than ever, yet also sensed him shouldering a weight that he couldn't fully share. Then images of Marco and Giuliana flashed through her mind. She recalled Giuliana's worried expression, her whispered remarks. Perhaps Giuliana was equally in the dark, only wanting the best for her husband. Outside the hallway was a buzz with speculation. Some spectators whispered that Delgado Enterprises was finished, that Christopher would be indicted on criminal charges. Others insisted that the evidence was too circumstantial. No one knew for sure which way the scales of justice would tip. Yet amid the swirl of rumors, one thing remained undeniable. Samantha's sudden collapse had changed the tone of the trial. People no longer saw Christopher Delgado as a distant cold magnate. They'd glimpsed his raw panic, his genuine affection, as he cradled his pregnant wife. And that emotional shift, though intangible, was perhaps the biggest twist of all. In a high-stakes legal drama that revolved around money deals and hidden agendas, the deeply human moment when a husband knelt beside his unconscious wife offered a stark contrast to the cynicism. It planted seeds of doubt in people's minds. Could a man who reacted with such tenderness truly be the monstrous fraudster described by the prosecution? As the courtroom resumed session, few could predict that the most jaw-dropping turn was yet to come. By the end of the day, Christopher would deliver a single whisper to Judge Hamilton, one that would send shockwaves through the benches, hush every murmur, and leave the entire chamber teetering on the edge of revelation. The final session of the day began under a tense hush. The overhead lights flickered on, illuminating the solemn faces of the jury. Though this was primarily a bench trial, a few advisors and legal clerks sat to the side, and both legal teams. It felt like the calm before a tempest. Madeline James rose, her spine straight. "Your Honor, we would like to call our final witness for the day, Leonard Michaels." A low rumble coursed through the assembled audience. Here he was, the city official at the heart of the alleged bribery scandal. A man about whom both sides had made conflicting claims. If he testified credibly, the entire outcome could hinge on his words. A bailiff escorted Michaels to the stand. He was a heavy-set man in his early 60s, with salt and pepper hair and a neat mustache. He sat down carefully, adjusting his glasses, looking decidedly uncomfortable. Daniel Whitmore folded his arms, clearly wary. Christopher maintained a facade of calm, but within, he braced himself. This was the man who might hold the key to exposing the real culprit or burying Christopher's case if he lied under oath. Madeline approached, offering Leonard Michaels a polite smile. "Mr. Michaels, please state your position and involvement with Delgado Enterprises." Clearing his throat, Michaels replied, "I'm the senior zoning coordinator for downtown Los Angeles. About a year ago, I oversaw the permit approvals for a mixed-use development funded by Delgado Enterprises." Madeline nodded, glancing at her notes. "And during this time, did you receive any direct financial incentives from Delgado Enterprises or its representatives in exchange for expediting or approving the permits?" Michael's Adam's apple bobbed. He wiped sweat from his brow with a handkerchief. For a moment the silence was palpable. Then he spoke, voice trembling. Yes, I received 2 wire transfers." A collective intake of breath echoed through the courtroom. Madeline pressed on. "From whom exactly?" He looked at Christopher, then down at his trembling hands. "The wires came from an offshore account linked to Delgado Enterprises. I have documents showing Christopher Delgado's signature on the authorization slip." A volley of camera shutters snapped. Christopher's face was impassive, but inside he felt a surge of disbelief and dread. If Michaels had forged his signature, it would be extremely damaging. Or was there another twist? Madeline's voice steadied. So, you are testifying that you personally saw Mr. Delgado's signature, that it was a bribe. Before Michaels could answer, Christopher rose from his seat. Objection, Your Honor. I request to approach the bench. Judge Hamilton raised an eyebrow. Very well, Mr. Delgado, come forward. Daniel Whitmore shot Christopher a bewildered look as he followed. Madeline also approached. The three converged before the bench. In a typical scenario, only the attorneys would speak, but Christopher's direct interjection was highly unorthodox. The judge frowned, but allowed it. Mr. Delgado, you have something to say? Christopher hesitated. Then he leaned in, lowering his voice, so only the judge and the two opposing counsel could hear. He uttered a single sentence, quiet enough that the rest of the room couldn't catch his words. For a split second, both Madeline and Daniel looked taken aback. Judge Hamilton's face went very still. An unsettled wave spread through the audience. Reporters strained to hear. Marco leaned forward, eyes narrowed. Samantha, who had crept back in against medical advice, stood at the threshold, an anxious hand braced on the doorframe. The judge's expression hardened into a strange mixture of concern and urgency. He cleared his throat. I'm calling an immediate in-chambers meeting. Mr. Delgado, Miss James, Mr. Whitmore, please follow me, bailiff. We'll have a brief recess. The room erupted into chaos. People shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Samantha's heart pounded. She'd never seen Christopher disrupt proceedings like that. He was usually so respectful of protocol. Dr. Dawson, who'd come to stand behind Samantha, whispered, "We should get you to sit." But Samantha shook her head. I need to know what's happening. In the corridor leading to the judge's chambers, Christopher walked quickly, flanked by Daniel and Madeline, with Judge Hamilton leading the way. As soon as they were inside and the door shut, the judge turned to Christopher. What you just told me, if it's true, it changes everything. Madeline blinked, clearly disoriented. Wait, I need clarification. Mr. Delgado, you can't just... Christopher faced her, his jaw set. There's a conspiracy within my company to funnel bribes to officials and pin it on me. I have evidence stored in a secure location, which I've just disclosed to the judge. He turned back to Hamilton. But that's only half the story. The other half involves personal threats made against me and my family should I expose the person responsible. Daniel's eyes widened. Christopher, why have you not shared this with me sooner? Christopher's shoulders slumped. I couldn't risk it leaking. If the guilty party knew I was onto them, they'd escalate. Judge Hamilton raised a hand for silence. Mr. Delgado, you realize the gravity of this claim. You're accusing another individual in your own company of orchestrating crimes, forging your signature, and threatening your family. Christopher nodded. Yes, I believe they capitalized on my friction with Marco to create a scapegoat scenario. They arranged the payments to Mr. Michaels under my name. Madeline frowned. And you have tangible proof. Christopher hesitated. Encrypted emails wire instructions with digital footprints that don't align with my usual communications and recordings from a private investigation I funded quietly. The folder is locked in a safe at the law offices of Cohen and Hale, with instructions that it only be opened under court order or if something happened to me. A charged silence filled the small chamber. Finally, the judge looked at Madeline. Ms. James, in light of this development, I'm inclined to issue a protective order and a subpoena for those records. However, I also need your input as prosecuting counsel. Madeline exhaled. Your Honor, this is highly unconventional. But if Mr. Delgado has legitimate evidence that exonerates him and implicates another party, we owe it to due process to examine it. Daniel stepped forward, relief and cautious optimism coloring his tone. "We should do so immediately, Your Honor." Judge Hamilton nodded. "Agreed. I'll grant a one-day recess. Tomorrow morning we'll review this evidence in camera. If it holds weight, we'll proceed accordingly." Christopher let out a shaky breath. At last he was able to place his cards on the table without jeopardizing Samantha's safety or tipping off the conspirator prematurely. But a question still gnawed at him. How would he keep Samantha and their unborn child safe if this new evidence threatened to reveal an even more dangerous game? Exiting the judge's chambers, the lawyers wore tense expressions, refusing to comment to the barrage of reporters. Christopher spotted Samantha lingering by the corridor. He rushed to her, wrapping an arm protectively around her shoulders. "It's going to be all right," he whispered, though uncertainty still throbbed in his mind. Samantha looked up at him, eyes shining with tears. "What did you say to the judge?" Christopher pressed his lips together. The truth, at least enough of it, to force the court to look deeper. He kissed her temples softly. "We're one step closer to clearing my name." She clung to him, wanting to believe it wholeheartedly. Yet a chilling thought slid through her. If there was someone powerful enough to forge Christopher's signature, bribe city officials, and manipulate entire deals, what lengths would that person go to when cornered? Tomorrow the evidence would be unveiled. But tonight, Samantha would find herself grappling with nightmares of the unknown. And no one in that courthouse could have predicted the extent of the revelations that would emerge or the danger that still lurked in the shadows, waiting to strike. That night, the house was quiet, but neither Christopher nor Samantha could sleep. She lay curled on one side of the bed, one hand on her belly, the other tucked under her cheek. Christopher sat in the chair near the window, staring into the darkness, going over every moment of the trial again in his mind. He had made the right move by revealing part of the truth to Judge Hamilton. But now that the spotlight had shifted to the anonymous traitor within his company, there was no room for error. The next day could bring redemption or more chaos. In the early hours, he crept back into bed, careful not to wake Samantha. But as he slid beneath the covers, she stirred and whispered, "You're still thinking about it, aren't you?" He exhaled. "I don't know how to stop." Samantha turned to face him. "We'll get through this. You exposed enough to force their hand. Tomorrow is the beginning of the end. I just hope that end doesn't put a target on us," he murmured. She moved closer and rested her forehead against his. "Then we face it together." By sunrise, the city was already buzzing. News of the courtroom interruption had made headlines. Talk shows speculated about what Christopher had whispered to the judge, and online forums debated theories, some wild, some frighteningly close to the truth. Meanwhile, inside Delgado Enterprises, the atmosphere had shifted. Employees whispered in corners, wondering who among them would be implicated. Security footage was being reviewed, accounts frozen, and private investigators were combing through communication records. Trust was no longer a given, it had become a luxury. Later that morning, Samantha's OB-GYN, Dr. Barnes, visited the estate. She checked the baby's vitals and gave Samantha a cautious green light to attend the next hearing, provided she avoided stress. Samantha laughed wryly. "Stress-free court sessions. I'll put that on my wish list." Dr. Barnes gave her a reassuring smile. "Just listen to your body, and if anything feels off, call me immediately." Christopher joined them as the doctor left. "You don't have to come tomorrow," he said. "I do," Samantha replied. "I need to see this through. With you." He didn't argue. They had come too far together to retreat now. That evening, Christopher received a call from his lawyer. "The safe at Cohen and Hale is prepped. We'll present the documents first thing tomorrow morning." He hung up and returned to the bedroom where Samantha was packing a small hospital bag just in case. You're really nesting, he teased gently. I'm really preparing, she corrected. One way or another, our lives change tomorrow. I want to be ready. Christopher took her hand and kissed her palm. Whatever happens, we go through it side by side. As night fell, they stood at the nursery door, gazing at the cradle they'd picked out months earlier. The walls were a soothing shade of sage green. Plush animals lined the shelves, waiting patiently for the little one to arrive. Soon, Samantha whispered, he'll be here soon. Christopher wrapped an arm around her waist, his hand resting protectively on her belly. And when he is, I want the world to be one where our name is clean, where we're safe. The following morning, the Delgado convoy left for court under heavy security. Reporters crowded the sidewalk, cameras rolling as Samantha, radiant and determined, stepped from the vehicle. Whispers followed her like shadows. Inside the courtroom, tension simmered just below the surface. Marco sat quietly beside Giuliana, who gave Samantha a tentative, respectful nod. Madeline James conferred with her team, visibly guarded. Daniel Whitmore looked confident, but wary. Then the doors opened, and an attorney from Cohen and Hale entered with a locked briefcase. The room fell silent. As the evidence was delivered to the judge, Christopher took Samantha's hand in his. Neither spoke. There was no need. Everything was now in motion. Judge Hamilton addressed the court. We will recess for an hour to examine the new evidence. I ask all parties to remain available. This material may shift the trajectory of the trial significantly. As the courtroom emptied, Christopher leaned towards Samantha. This is it. She nodded, her voice calm but resolute. I'm ready. Little did they know, behind the judge's chamber doors, the truth was finally preparing to surface. And when it did, it would shake the foundations of power and loyalty in ways no one could have imagined. In the days following the explosive court session, life became surreal for the Delgados. Christopher worked late into the night with forensic accountants determined to unmask the insider who had sabotaged him. The betrayal from within his own company cut deeper than any business deal gone wrong. Samantha, now nearing her due date, tried to shield herself from stress. Gentle yoga parenting books and constant bodyguard presence became her new normal. Christopher kept insisting the threat had mostly passed, but neither of them were taking chances. One crisp morning, Samantha woke to find Christopher already gone. A text blinked on her phone. Have a lead on the insider. Meeting with Daniel. Love you. She closed her eyes and whispered a silent prayer for a quick resolution. That afternoon, a surprise call came from Giuliana Avelar. Samantha, can we meet for coffee? I owe you an apology for everything Marco and I put you through. Samantha hesitated. I'm not sure it's wise. It's a public place. Just us. I need to make this right. With clearance from her bodyguard, Carlos, Samantha agreed to meet at the Beverly Vista Cafe. The spot was crowded, secure, and under constant surveillance. Giuliana greeted her warmly. You look radiant, she said, her eyes softening as they fell on Samantha's belly. 36 weeks, any day now, Samantha replied, sipping her tea. Giuliana sighed. Marco's devastated. He feels foolish, used, but most of all, guilty for turning on Christopher and by extension, on you. Samantha gave a measured nod. It's over now. What matters is that the truth came out. Tears welled in Giuliana's eyes. I should have known. I doubted our friendship. I'm sorry. Samantha reached across the table. Let's move forward. We've both been through enough. The conversation, though brief, brought a sense of closure. As Samantha returned to her SUV, a sudden cramp gripped her abdomen. She winced, then dismissed it as the baby shifting. But something about the sensation made her uneasy. Back home, she flipped channels absent-mindedly until Christopher burst through the door, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and relief. "Sam," he said breathless, "we found him. The one behind everything." "It's Gavin Price," Samantha blinked. "The COO?" Christopher nodded, pulling her gently into a chair. He had access to all financial systems. He moved the bribe money manipulated Marco and used our feud to cover his tracks. We caught him with digital footprints, emails, transfers, even meetings with outside investors. But why, Samantha asked. He planned to frame me, take over Delgado Enterprises, and come out a hero when the company crumbled. Samantha closed her eyes. Greed. That's all it ever was. Just then, another contraction hit stronger, more defined. Christopher's expression turned to alarm. "Sam," she inhaled slowly, "I think it's time." In a flurry of motion, Christopher called Dr. Barnes while staff readied the car. The drive to Cedars-Sinai felt like a blur. Samantha gripped his hand through every jolt, every twist of pain. His phone buzzed non-stop with updates and questions, but he ignored them all. Hours later, in a brightly lit delivery room, Samantha cried out through the pain. Her grip on Christopher's hand grew vice-like. Finally, their baby, a healthy, wailing boy, was placed in her arms. Tears ran freely down Christopher's face as he cut the cord and kissed her forehead. "We did it," he whispered. She nodded, exhausted but glowing. "We did." The next morning, as Samantha rested with the baby nestled beside her, Christopher stood by the window, cradling his son. A gentle knock sounded. Judge Hamilton entered, followed by Daniel Whitmore. They carried flowers and a soft blue plush bear. "Congratulations," the judge said warmly. Daniel smiled. "They arrested Gavin Price this morning. Full confession. The charges against you are being formally dropped." Christopher exhaled, finally allowing himself to relax. "Thank you." Judge Hamilton's stern face softened. "Justice has prevailed, and fate, it seems, is smiling on your family." As they left, Samantha gazed down at their baby boy, brushing a finger against his tiny cheek. Christopher wrapped an arm around her shoulders. They had survived betrayal, courtroom chaos, and crushing public scrutiny. But here they were, together stronger than before, with a son to anchor their future. And as Christopher kissed her temple, he whispered the same silent promise he'd made in court: never again. No more secrets. No more fear. Their battle wasn't just about proving innocence. It was about reclaiming trust, protecting their family, and choosing love no matter the storm. Life can change in a heartbeat sometimes, in the most dramatic, unexpected ways. Christopher and Samantha Delgado's story reminds us of the power of truth, loyalty, and resilience. They faced damning accusations, nearly lost everything, and still emerged stronger, holding their newborn baby in their arms. If you felt every twist and turn of this roller coaster saga, if you rooted for Samantha as she fought to protect her family and prayed for Christopher to unmask the real villain, then don't let this ending be the last word. Your support means the world. Help us bring more stories of courage and hope to life by hitting like, sharing with friends who love a gripping drama, and subscribing to our channel. We have so many more inspiring tales to tell, and we want you along for every riveting moment. Together, let's celebrate love, justice, and the triumph of the human spirit.